Jimmy's bachelor party.
I would never want to do that.
Jimmy's getting married on Sunday, so we're all gonna start at that Sunday. We're gonna just go to run back to work.
You guys know. I would be so sad.
Like purpose?
It's the bachelor
I would
party.
be so sad. If someone's like, it's a party. Oh, we're gonna run. 14 miles.
There is a bachelor party on
purpose.
Oh, I didn't run one class, and I thought it was optional that you could be like run order.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's like Missy. Like, why would you could run or walk?
Why would you do that?
I know, that's why I was like, oh, that seems like the most low-key. I'll take it.
Why would you run?
I'm just gonna bow out.
Yeah, it just makes me sad.
I'm doing a race in a couple of weeks. Trails, farm, 13, 14. So you can do the 5 plus 13. And I'm doing 13, and all you guys are like wearing shoes. I was like, 13's fine, guys. You don't need to be drinking like
I
that.
would like drive there and get out of my car and be like, no.
But how cheap.
Have you heard the story about my mom? I did my 100 She was right. So she would like go to the aid station. She clothes or cheese. And I run 50 miles and I had 50 bucks. It's a unique place. And she looks at me, she's like, "Are you having fun?" She goes, "Your bag's heavy." And I was like, "What?" Your bag is really heavy. And I was like, "You know what else is heavy? Those 50 miles I just did."
My legs.
Yeah, you know what else is heavy? The 50 miles going out at night. That's what's heavy. And she was like, "Oh my God." I said, "I'm so sorry." Your bag's heavy. Yeah, you having fun carrying that? You're like 10 feet from your car, waiting on me?
I'll get one with the wheels.
Yeah, I know. So that's what I told her. I'm doing the 50 in October. And I was like, "That's a little draggy." Oh, thank you.
I'll go and just place it there. If you can unzip it for me when I go by.
I know. I told
It's
Lindsay,
not too much.
I'm
I mean,
gonna
it's hot out, I know, so
I want to take a
roll it out your way.
I want to make a baggie and like hand it to her and be like, "Here's what I need." Just carry that bag.
Test it. Walk back, see how it feels.
Your bag's heavy. So that's become a joke. Like your cross feels really heavy. So he said, so when I was so sick, I was laying in the hospital and I had my little overnight bag. I was living and dying. You know, she goes, "Your bag." And I was fine.
I love people. Whenever I had my daughter, I had a C-section and I had science when I was in there. And like, you know, like, people like shaking on the table and stuff, it's really, I think I got that experience. I like, right, the people was in chair, there was like, insurance, that's right. And like, when she's and all the nurses were like, "Oh my God, are you okay?"
Look around, kids. I'm the star of the show.
This is cool.
Oh, soon.
Yeah. You can take my seat, I'll sit here. I'm sorry? If they're live, so you can just present. Can't believe your update stuff. Now you signed back up. What happened to you? Can't imagine. You must have been out of town and forgot about that or something, weren't you? Slipped your mind. Well, it's like I made a new friend here now. Somebody else will sit beside me for a couple of years. There you go.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started. First item on the agenda is for the board to hold a project hearing on the proposed project. If you're interested in speaking at the hearing, please make sure you have signed the sign-in sheet at the back of the room, which should include your name and address. After a presentation by the administration and its advisors, there will be an opportunity for the public to make comments about the project. At the hearing, we will ask that each person limit their comments to 3 minutes and that the topic to be limited to the proposed project under consideration. The notice of this hearing was published as legally required. At this time, I'll ask that the school attorney explain the purpose of this hearing.
Thank you. Pursuant to Indiana Code Section 20-26-7-37, before a school corporation may spend more than $1 million to build, repair, or alter a school building that will be financed by a lease or bonds, it must hold a public hearing at which explanations of the potential value of the project to the school corporation and community are given. These public hearings and the adoption of resolution is the very beginning of the legal process. These resolutions establish the financial terms for the proposed project.
We'll now hear from the superintendent about the process of determining and communicating the project to the community and the need for the project.
The project, Mr. President, is primarily related to a solar energy savings project. I know this is something that North Lawrence Schools has considered in the past, but obviously a majority of the funds will be spent on that. In looking through the process, we look at it would be about $4 million, but the benefit for North Lawrence Community Schools with the solar project, we anticipate $8 million in revenue over the next 20 years. Obviously, that's an estimate. And that $8 million is past the $4 million payback. So I know it had been presented previously. Some of you have some prior knowledge, I think, with some of the solar. I think most importantly, as we have worked to reduce our operational cost, this will have a direct impact in reducing our operational cost, which will allow us to use less educational funds in the future in an effort to increase the salary and wages of our teachers. So obviously we will have some excess funds of that. We listed Shelswick and Needmore, both of those schools. I would anticipate somewhere around the $1 million range, give or take, as we look at that process. And both of those facilities do have wastewater treatment plants, and I know both of those facilities have some air handling units that are in need of replacement, or ones that we have repaired a little more frequently than others. So I listed those two schools as future or other possible usages.
We'll now hear from Damian Magos. Is that right?
That's correct.
From Raymond James. He's our placement agent.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. What I want to talk about here is just the general obligation bond process. Look at a budget and a proposed payback for the project. What's interesting, when we started the process, we were working under pay 22 numbers, and during the advertisement for the meeting, the pay 23 numbers came out. And so what I want to do is kind of how the project looked, but how it will look now that we have updated the assessed value. And so on page 2, so general obligation bond or the 2% limit, or your constitutional debt limit as it's called, each entity that has the ability to tax and levy has a maximum amount that they can borrow. And it's an aggregate amount of all of the general obligation debt. It's a little bit different than the holding corporation debt that the school has used to fund some of the other capital projects. So the way that the statute reads, it's a third of 2% of your certified net less any other debt that you have. So on page 2, you can see the pay 22 certified net value is 1.2 billion. 2% of that is 25 million. A third of that is 8.3 million. The school has in 2014, there was a refinancing of the pension bonds. There's about $3 million still outstanding on those, so that counts against that 8.3 limit. We're looking at a $5 million borrowing, so you would have total of a little over $8 million of GO debt, which would leave you about $300,000. So you have capacity to do a $5 million GO issue. On the next page, so that's what I was saying. So what happened was you had essentially a 17% increase in your certified net value from 22 to 23. So when you apply the same calculation, you could see that your capacity increased to 1.7. Okay, so that's when we were also looking at the payback, we were looking at a 5-year payback, but because of this increase in the assessed value, we could pay that $5 million off in essentially 3 years now. And so on page 4, you're looking at, this is kind of an estimated budget. So if we were to bond for $5 million, you're looking at essentially a construction or proceeds for the solar array, and then whatever else you wanted to use, and then also cost of issuance. So the cost of issuance, this is a maximum number. There'll probably be less than that. But just to kind of give you an idea that there is a cost to do this, and so you're looking at about 4.8 million available for project, maybe 100-some thousand for cost of issuance to get to the 5 million. On page 5 is the proposed payback. So if we're able to, the timeline is to get through the process, sell bonds by the end of the year. That way you would be able to put a levy in place in 2023. So we're looking at 3 payments essentially of about $1.8 million, and then a tiny little payment in 2026. I'm carrying a high interest rate just to make sure that the numbers work. I'm using a 5%, a 3-year. We just did just a little over a 2-year financing where we were at a 4%. So I'm essentially 1% higher in rate. So I'm hoping that when we actually go out and sell this, that we're able to get rid of that 26 payment. So essentially it's 3 years. And then you can take a look at on page 6 in terms of the impact. So in 23, when the levy hits, your rate goes back up to the 20, essentially just under what the 2020 rate was of 34 cents. What I like about this structure, a couple of things. One is, whenever we're doing bond issues, you try to match the term of the issue with the life of the project. Okay, classic. You're not going to borrow money for 20 years to buy computer equipment. Okay? So here you are. You're borrowing $5 million to put in a solar array that I believe the contractors or whatever for that would say it's going to last 25 plus or minus 25 years. You're able to fund that and pay it off in 3 years. So you have this useful life of this asset, and for 20 some odd years, and you've already paid for it. And so, and you're going to see that benefit plus some by doing this. The other thing that it does is it keeps your rate, it gets your rate up to about that 34 cents, and you can see as your debt comes off in between 25 and 26, it sets up the school corporation for additional funding if there are projects to do, or at that point, the 14 issue will, the GO issue will come off. This will come off. You'll have your full 8 million plus available for, and you could do, small, if you want to do smaller projects or annual or something like that and pay those off quickly. So it sets you up, one, to fund this, pay it off quickly, and two, it gives the administration, the board, the community additional flexibility down the road for whatever may come.
Thank you, Damien. We'll now open the public hearing. Remember, if you would like to speak, please sign in on the sheet, which is located on the podium or in the back of the room. As I mentioned earlier, we ask that you state your name and address, limit your comments to the proposed project and financing. Keep any comments to 3 minutes and avoid being repetitive if possible. I have a sign-in sheet. Anything else?
Yeah. You might see if he's on the podium too, I don't know.
Thank you.
Well, they didn't sign, or did anybody sign the blue card? Okay.
No way.
Oh, we have some here on the podium. I don't know if there was any out there. Anyone like to speak can come on up. It's a public hearing.
Can we ask questions?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm Scott King, 3120 Bernico Road. I have some questions. My handout only had one page. I didn't have 4, 5, and 6. But he spoke about the bond issue and the finances. I have questions about the project itself. So I was curious as to when the project was going to start and when they expect the project to be finished.
We would anticipate, a lot of it, is finding a contractor. I mean, this is the first start as far as borrowing the money.
Right.
We don't have, we've got to get through this process. But I would anticipate within the next year.
Okay. And have we done a financial analysis? We know what the return on investment is and the breakout time?
We've received.
Break-even point, we know.
Yeah, we've received that. We've received some initial information as far as what I'd referenced, as far as they estimate. They've taken our energy cost bills with Duke Energy, and we've run those estimations, and they estimate a $12 million return over the life of the solar panel.
Okay, but let's say we start doing it in 2025, and then at some point, we're gonna have a break-even point where we start saving money on the original investment. Do we know what that time frame is?
Yeah, he just indicated that we would.
No, I'm not talking about the financing and the bond.
Well,
I'm talking about the project itself.
From day one, we
Or
start
energy costs.
receiving money back from the energy cost, 100% of the energy cost.
Yeah, but at what point will we have a break-even point where our money, the revenue from the energy cost meets the cost that it costs to do the project? At what point do we get back the $8 million that we spent?
We were,
6 years, 8 years, do you know what that is?
a lot of it is with the rate and how quick we get it going, and even the cost of the installation of the process, but they estimated in the 5 to 7 year range.
So you have bids on it and they've estimated that long?
We haven't had any bids on it because
So the
we don't have the money to spend yet.
Okay,
So
so-
we will get to that process.
So the estimate of 5 to 7 years of return on investment break-even point, who gave you that estimate? You say they estimated 5 to 7 years, where did that estimate come from?
Synergy was one of the companies who had come in and who had also previously presented to the board back in, I believe it was 2016, 17, that time period.
So it's based on other solar installations similar to this?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And so, based on the history of NLCS's capital improvement funds, what's the normal break-even point on return on investments? Is it usually try to get in 5 years, 7 years, 8 years? Is it a a standard break-even point you try to get on return on investment for capital improvement program?
Well, capital improvement funds are a little bit different because a lot of those capital improvements may be the purchasing of bleachers or the purchasing of computers or the purchasing of carpet or tile or those types of things. So I think it's many of our capital projects funds, which is completely separate than this, don't necessarily generate revenue.
Okay.
This is probably
But you'll
one.
have, but, okay.
This is probably one of the only projects that I know that North Lawrence has considered that is actually generating revenue.
Yeah, but you'll have other investments or capital improvement programs that you have to figure out what's gonna cost you, what you're gonna save based on that cost, and at some point you'll save enough. You may not generate revenue, but you'll save enough to have a break-even point from your original investment.
Correct.
Okay, and normally it's a 5-year or 3-year thing. But if the life of this is 20 years, then 7 years might be okay. It'd be interesting to know, I'd like to see a copy of that study if I could.
Well, and I think once we put
it's-
things out
okay.
for bid and we go through the process and there's more than one company and, the board will explore all that. They're not voting on the
This is
project
the
and
bond
that
issue.
data. This is just to start the process with Raymond James and our bond counsel, Ice Miller, who assist us and many other school districts.
So this is for the school board. Do we have any other major projects that the school needs, like maybe HVAC across multiple buildings, a new swimming pool that we need sometime at VNL? Any other major projects that we might want to not spend this money on solar and do that instead at this time? I mean, have we explored other places that we might need this $8 million?
I think with our capital
I'm
projects.
sorry, I'd like the board to.
Well, I think tonight, this is a public hearing. They're really,
Well,
they're really to observe, and I think
They can't answer that?
We're,
I mean-
Mr. King, we're
Okay.
taking in this information from Damien, and I mean, this is a public hearing, but we're taking in the information as well, so those type of things, I'll look to him, school attorney, and our advisors for that information.
Okay, it's really, I guess it's not specifically a bond issue or a legal issue. I was just asking the school board if you know of any other major capital funds coming down the pike that we might want to not spend this money on now. I didn't know if as a board or as administration, you've looked at the next 3 or 4 years of what's coming up for expenditures to see if,
I think
We might not wanna-
will, once we have the money, I think that,
This is just to obtain the money.
we will.
That's what this is just to get the money in our hands.
yeah, I know. So no matter what you want to spend it on, just to get the money. That's what I'm saying. If you know something's coming up 2 years from now, then wait till then to get the money instead of now.
No, we
Then
can't.
our tax rate would drop.
Yeah, that's the
Okay,
problem.
all right. So you're just
We need to
deciding
obtain, yeah.
if the details of the bond issue.
But we haven't
right.
decided what we're gonna spend it on yet. That's not, I mean, we've talked about the solar thing, but I think we'll look through what are the things that need to be addressed in the next few years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the solar issue is what's driving it, but that's not where you necessarily going to spend the money.
Right.
Yeah,
we're not voting on that tonight.
I mean, this is
Yeah.
just we need to obtain the money at this point, to keep our tax rate where it is at this point.
Okay. So this information he talked about, page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, is that available somewhere?
Yeah, we can provide it to you.
Okay.
Mr. Megas brought that this evening
Right.
to present, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
All right.
Anybody else?
Okay, so with that, entertain a motion to adopt the project resolution.
So moved.
Bailey makes the motion in a second.
I'll second it.
Mr. Lombrick seconds the motion. Questions on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Next thing, could I get a motion to adopt the preliminary bond resolution?
So moved.
Mr. Bennett makes the motion in a second.
Second.
Mr. Gregory seconds the motion. Questions on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. And then entertain a motion to adopt the, let's see, the last one. The reimbursement resolution. Mr. Gervis makes a motion in a second.
Second.
Bailey seconds the motion. Questions on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Motion is second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.